If you've watched any anime or read any manga while growing up, then it's highly likely that you were influenced or at least impacted by Weekly Shonen Jump. Launched in 1968 and in weekly publication since 1969, Weekly Shonen Jump is the best-selling manga magazine in the world, having sold around 7.5 billion copies during its lifetime and spawning numerous tankobon volume releases. But what's more relevant to me and to you, probably Western English speaker between the ages of 17 and 25, is the actual output of the magazine. Fist of the North Star, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Saint Seiya, Slam Dunk, Dragon Ball, and many more of the great trailblazers of manga, especially regarding the West, spawned from this massive weekly clump of way too brittle paper. It's no exaggeration to say that if you are a manga fan from outside of Japan, what manga is to you is likely heavily linked to Weekly Shonen Jump. But times change, and what once was a mysterious source of rawness and swag has now become a fully accessible magazine to us, with same-day translations, overseas delivery that is surprisingly cheap, and micro-communities for each of the 22-ish titles running in the magazine at any given time. With this increased availability, it's natural to become more curious about the magazine. What series are currently being published? Are they any good? Is there anything interesting happening behind the scenes? These and more questions are the topics of this video. I read about half of the series in this magazine weekly, and as part of my position as co-host of the Shonen Chill podcast, I also generally try to keep up with some of the anecdotes and stories that happen around the magazine. So, if you are interested in what's happening in Shonen Jump, how some of your old favorites are doing, and if there may be a new series worth trying out, then you've come to the right place. I'll give a quick overview on each series, as well as some general knowledge and anecdotes and impressions regarding how it's been doing and what's been going on in 2022. Specifically, I will mostly focus on the state of older series in 2022 that you probably already know, while I'll focus more on impression and review on newer series you might not have heard of yet. Additionally, to spice things up a bit, there will be a few intermissions where we talk about some broader topics related to the magazine, just to give you, and me, a breather between all of these various series. Oh, and I'll put a visual spoiler warning for some of the older series in the magazine like One Piece and My Hero, so keep an eye on that. With that out of the way, grab a snack, maybe some water. This will be a longer one. Let's talk about Weekly Shonen Jump in 2022. I'm gonna try and keep this section brief because let's be real, if you are watching this video, you know damn well what One Piece is. In publication since July 22nd, 1997, Eiichiro Oda's pirate adventure manga is the oldest series currently running in WSJ, in many ways a prized artifact of a now bygone era of Jump. For perspective, the first chapter of One Piece released in the same Jump issue as the JoJo chapter in which Giorno kills Gyatso. One Piece is, of course, the story of Monkey D. Luffy, who assembles a crew of misfits to sail the high seas and become the king of the pirates by finding the One Piece, the greatest treasure of all time. 2022 was a big year for One Piece. The manga wrapped up the extremely long and somewhat divisive Wano arc and is now, according to Oda himself, definitively moving towards its finale. That's kind of crazy. A series that started a year after I was born is now finally ready to conclude. Mangaka are notoriously bad at estimating the length of their own work, but based on where the story has gone and the secrets and plots it has begun focusing on, this seems about right. I may not personally care much for One Piece, but I am nonetheless excited to see how it handles this final stretch. Or more specifically, I am curious about the prospect of a manga industry after One Piece, and I think the way that ending is handled specifically is going to have consequences in what kind of series will be emphasized and pushed once One Piece is over. And of course, I'm interested to see if the series can live up to the immense weight of 2 decades worth of expectations. Another cool thing that happened with One Piece this year is its release schedule. Very gradually, the series has began taking very frequent breaks, to the point where fans even began theorizing that the manga had officially switched over to a bi-weekly schedule. While nothing official has been said about this to my knowledge, One Piece has consistently reduced its output, now averaging around 3 chapters per month as opposed to the usual 4 chapters per month. This is a good thing, as it allows for better recovery and less pressure on the mangaka's part. The importance of Oda specifically doing this is also potentially significant. If the biggest veteran of the magazine can start moving towards a healthier schedule, maybe the younger generation can join in and make it more normalized across the entire magazine. So far, this doesn't seem to have happened generally, unfortunately, but it is nonetheless good to see more breaks taken by anyone. The weekly manga industry is pretty brutal, and so if this allows Oda to take one extra nap per week, I think that is good and cool. Few series are as strong an indication of the immense workload of the weekly manga grind as Yoshihiro Togashi's Hunter x Hunter, a fantasy story set in a world of superpowered hunters exploring mystical lands and the dark underbelly of the human condition. Initially published on March 16, 1998, making it the second oldest series in the magazine, Hunter x Hunter is still listed as a weekly series within WSJ, despite not having released a chapter since November 2018. This is a well-documented tragedy within the manga sphere, but the SparkNotes version is that Togashi found great success with his previous series, Yu Yu Hakusho, which he ended abruptly due to a mounting avalanche of stress, health problems, and sleep deprivation, resulting from his work on the series. He returned to manga
1 year
later for short horror manga Level E, and then, 3 years after that, began working on Hunter x Hunter. However, around 2005, the series began taking these massive hiatuses, months and even years at a time. Little was known about the cause of these, but considering the previous cancellation of Yu Yu Hakusho, the main suspect was once again Togashi's health. Author's notes that describe frequent back pain seem to confirm this, and as the hiatuses became longer and longer, with its current one reaching well over 80 issues, hope for a return to form for both the manga and the mangaka seemed ever slimmer. Until this summer, when a mysterious Twitter account popped up, seemingly posting manuscript pages related to Hunter x Hunter. After much confusion and speculation, Yusuke Murata, artist of One Punch Man, stepped in and confirmed that this account is indeed Yoshihiro Togashi, which was followed by both the account itself and the official Shonen Jump channels confirming that Togashi was indeed working on a new batch of chapters and that Hunter x Hunter was not dead. Not only that, but Togashi is now constantly updating his fans on his progress, posting pictures of page numbers of various chapters that are in the pipeline. He has also since opened up about his health, giving us a glimpse of just how uncomfortable his condition has become. I was unable to sit in a chair for 2 years, which made me unable to draw, but by throwing conventional methods to the wayside, I have been able to resume drawing somehow. Everyone, I sincerely ask you to take care of your backs and hips. I couldn't get into position to wipe my butt and had to take a shower every time I pooped. It takes 3 to 5 times longer for me to do everyday movements. He also included this drawing of how he now has to draw laying down. While it has not been elaborated on what exactly happened, it is evident and extremely admirable that Yoshihiro Togashi continues to pursue his art despite these conditions. He is also seemingly getting plenty of rest and is allowed to return to Jump at any time at his pace. And while we have no release date for the new chapters, hi, Editing Dennis here. I just wanted to quickly say that there was an update on this while I was working on the video. Shonen Jump has officially announced that Hunter x Hunter will be returning on October 23rd, which, by the time you see this, will probably only be a couple of days away. So yeah, never been this happy to have to correct myself. Back to the video. I am just happy to hear that Togashi is pushing on, and I hope for his recovery and well-being. Can you believe that MHA, often categorized as a new gen series, is actually the third oldest manga currently running in Jump? Published since July 7th, 2014, Koi Horikoshi's action battle Shonen depicts a world in which superpowers have become the norm, and society exists in a perpetual state of Marvel-esque heroic antics. Honestly, what can I say about MHA that hasn't been said before by others and by myself? Its popularity was explosive, as it began publication right when Naruto was ending and filled that void almost effortlessly, also following the adventures of a marginalized underdog with something to prove. Not just that, but it leaned into a fairly novel direction, American superhero comics, an aesthetic choice that came at just the right time, as Avengers type was flooding the global entertainment market. And with a well-made and well-marketed anime added to the mix, My Hero Academia became the face of the new generation of manga in terms of popularity and normalization among casual audiences, only being ousted by newer series fairly recently. But now, in 2022, things are a little different. My Hero is no longer a fresh new series, but instead an 8-year-old cornerstone of the magazine, and it, just like One Piece, is now moving towards its finale. In fact, MHA is in an even greater hurry, as it is currently engaged in what it continues to call the final fight. This decision has been somewhat controversial, as many fans seem to consider this premature, with some going as far as believing the marketing around the finale to be a red herring, and that the series will actually end on a cliffhanger teasing a sequel. Either way, the final arc of MHA has been tumultuous and eventful, but one anecdote I would like to highlight is a perceived conflict of editor-author relations. Around September 2020, My Hero Academia received a new main editor, a man all press simply calls Taguchi-san. Taguchi-san would go on to become one of the most wildly theorized and scrutinized aspects of the series, due to his track record. Taguchi-san had been the editor of Samurai 8, and would go on to also supervise Red Hood, Neru, and Earthchild. Notice anything? Every one of these series, objectively speaking, failed. The latter three were all cancelled early on in their run, with Red Hood sticking out due to its exceptionally angry and resentful final few chapters. And Samurai 8 was maybe an even bigger disaster, as it was supposed to be the triumphant return of Naruto author Masashi Kishimoto, a return that was heralded by an extreme marketing push and ended with a swift cancellation after less than a year of publication. And now, the editor of all of these had joined the My Hero Academia editing staff. Moreover, it was exactly around this time that many controversial plot decisions and elements were introduced into the manga, leading to the formation of a very persistent fan theory. Was Taguchi-san a cursed man, an editor so bad and so pathological that his involvement dragged down every series he touched? Was Taguchi-san responsible for My Hero Academia's new direction, its missteps, and even its sudden rush to the end? No. Probably not. The problem with this theory is that it vastly overestimates the power of a manga editor. While they can certainly wield great influence in a series' early days, and while there have historically been some incredibly assertive editors that have made their mark on the series they supervised, the idea that one editor can jump into a series in its 7th year of publication and wrestle all control away from the author, with the latter having no recourse, just isn't realistic. An author could easily overrule the new editor or even request a new one if tensions were to get that bad, especially the author of a major money cow like My Hero Academia. If anything, it's kind of disrespectful to Horikoshi to characterize him as completely subservient to some evil editor, as if the man has no creative vision and confidence at all. Horikoshi fought hard for his 3rd series, MHA, to be his first big success, and it is not exactly believable that he would just roll over and let a new editor do whatever he wants with it. Not to mention that, according to this theory, Taguchi-san walked into his new job working on an immensely popular series, and his very first command was,
"Alright, let's wrap this up."
Effectively working towards his own unemployment from the project? If anything, an all-powerful editor would insist on prolonging the story, because it'll make the company more money and for the personal opportunity to continue working on a high-profile series. But maybe most damningly, Taguchi-san left in June of this year, giving the mantle of editor to Imamura, and yet MHA hasn't suddenly improved. If anything, some of the most controversial and most contentious story elements have sprung up only after Taguchi left. So, no, Taguchi-san was most likely not an extremely influential and terrible editor, and his track record is more than likely a mix of bad place, bad time, and maybe a few genuine editorial missteps. Most stories of rogue editors are either unsubstantiated fabrications or only so well known because they are so unusual. My Hero's current state is thus almost certainly not the result of outside meddling, but the result of Horikoshi's vision, for better and for worse. Speaking of series that are much older than you may realize, Black Clover has been in publication since February 16th, 2015, making it the 4th oldest series in the magazine. Yuki Tabata's action manga takes place in a magical world of knights and kings, where everyone is born with the ability to wield arcane forces. One young man is however born without any magical ability, and thus must cleave out his destiny through other means. As far as premises go, it definitely falls into the Big 3 era underdog story trope, while also using a fairly gamey fantasy setting that has become extremely saturated over the past decade, with Shonen Jump alone hosting numerous fantasy magic series at various points. But despite this, Black Clover is still here. Other attempts at the formula have come and gone, and yet this manga keeps on trucking. This alone, I think, tells us that at the very least, Black Clover is pretty good at being what it wants to be. An action-fueled crazy battle shonen, with crazy power-ups, a magical expansive world, and simple characterization focused on easily digestible tropes. However, what made 2022 a different year for Black Clover was that it actually wasn't in publication for a decent chunk of it. In April of this year, author Yuki Tabata announced a 3-month-long hiatus for the series, both in preparation for the final arc of the series and in order to allow for some rest and recovery on his part. This was a pretty big deal, as hiatuses in modern weekly Shonen Jump were generally associated with Hunter x Hunter, and rarely came with such a detailed explanation and notice. In a way, this seemed pretty hopeful. In the announcement, this decision was described as a cooperative decision between Tabata and the editorial department, possibly foreshadowing a more artist health-oriented approach for the whole magazine. It was also great that it was Tabata specifically who received his hiatus, as he's an author who has been fairly outspoken about the difficulties of being both a mangaka and a new father. For now, Tabata is back, and if fan reactions are anything to go by, he is delivering better than ever. Wouldn't you know it, letting your artists rest and replenish their energy actually improves their output. Crazy. In the magazine since March 5th, 2018, Jujutsu Kaisen is one of the more recent public darlings of Weekly Shonen Jump. Gege Akutami's action-packed urban fantasy follows Yuji, who becomes infused with an ancient evil and now has to navigate a world of cursed spirits and sorcerers. Following the extremely high-quality anime adaptation by Studio Mappa, Jujutsu Kaisen has made a distinct footprint in the public eye, especially globally. Satoru Gojo is now among the most recognizable anime and manga characters of the decade, after all. 2022 was a big year for Jujutsu Kaisen as far as Weekly Shonen Jump is concerned, specifically. The series began chipping away at the massive Culling Games arc, which eschews the traditional build-up to climax structure that most big shonen arcs tend to use, in favor of a pocket approach, wherein the build-up happens within the climax arc itself, which has so far made for an exhilarating and intensely varied experience. 2022 was also, just like with Black Clover, a year that put the artist's health into focus. Gege Akutami took a month-long hiatus in June of last year, 2021, initially announced to be indefinite. This was explicitly done to allow them to recover their health, which was described as being in poor condition. The announcement came after Akutami had submitted an unfinished sketchy chapter, and then, 2 weeks after, released a chapter that was only 9 pages long. a stark decrease from the magazine's usual 15 to 20 pages per series. Now, over a year since the series' return, the renewed and refreshed energy can be felt throughout the entire series, with interesting ideas and exciting moments being delivered very frequently. Here is the first series you might not actually know, which is weird considering that Mission Yozakura Family is actually one of the older series in the magazine, having started publication on August 26, 2019. It follows the story of Tayo, whose childhood friend Mutsumi turns out to be the heiress to a family of superpowered spies. As Tayo enters the world of assassins and secret plots, battle shonen shenanigans ensue. This series is not one I read regularly personally, but my general impression is that it is largely a fun and exciting shonen romp. What is most curious about the series, however, is how severely undermarketed it is. I mean, it's been running for 3 years and been received generally pretty well, and yet it receives almost no publicity in the West, not even from dedicated news and marketing channels. The most egregious example of this, however, has to be the fact that the series, despite being 3 years old and having released almost 150 chapters, has still not received an English print release. Wiz has announced the first volume for Q3 of 2022. So if there is one series that really deserves a chance, it is Mission Yozakura Family, a series that did everything right and somehow still only received scraps. The actual underdog of Shonen Jump. Oof, that's a lot of series, and we still have plenty to go. Let's take a quick break and talk about how you can actually read all of these series, and how to best do it legally, if you so choose. Generally, there are 2 ways to read weekly Shonen Jump series. You either read them weekly, as the chapters come out, or you buy the collected volume releases. The volumes are an excellent choice if you like collecting and having the definitive version of a series. Volumes are compiled quite some time after the original chapters come out, and thus include corrections and extra materials not found in the weekly release. For buying volumes physically like this, you can find them the same way you find books, either in physical bookstores or online storefronts. My go-to website for buying manga is Book Depository, as they have international shipping and a pretty massive catalog. #not sponsored. Whatever I can't find there, I plunder from Amazon. Just to make life easier for everyone, I have linked the first physical volume of every series you talk about today in the description. So if you want to get any of these, that's where you'll find them, if they have an English physical release in the first place, of course. Note that these are affiliate links, so they also support the channel. I love you, uwu. If you want digital volumes, that is to say ebook versions of these volumes, then you can either buy them on Amazon or through the dedicated Shonen Jump app. Speaking of the Shonen Jump app, this brings us to the second way to read weekly Shonen Jump manga. Reading them, well, weekly. Let's first talk about how to do this legally. The Shonen Jump app I just mentioned is by far the best way to read WSJ manga legally. It contains a gargantuan library of every possible thing Weekly Shonen Jump has ever released. Hey woo, Editing Dennis here again. I realized that I made it sound like the app has literally everything Shonen Jump has ever released, and that is not true. So for clarity's sake, they have everything that is consistent with the Shonen Jump online vault, which is tens of thousands of chapters, but not literally everything that's ever been in the magazine. However, that vault is constantly updated, so more than likely whatever series you want to read is either already in the vault or is about to be in the vault. Yeah, just thought I'd clear that up because I don't want to give you any false hopes or impressions. The Shonen Jump app has a lot of shit, and 99% of the time they have what you're looking for if you're just a Western fan. But still, just for clarity's sake, it is not literally everything. Alright, Editing Dennis out. As well as select series from other magazines, such as Chainsaw Man Part 2 and Shojin X, which are both on the Jump Plus web service. The Shonen Jump app comes in 2 types, free and paid. The free version lets you read the first 3 chapters and the newest 3 chapters of any series for free. The idea here is that getting into a new series and keeping up with your favorites is supposed to be entirely free. Moreover, new chapters are posted every week on Sunday, meaning that for series like My Hero Academia, this app gives you access at the exact same time as the Japanese chapters come out, no delay whatsoever. Now, all of the other chapters? That's what the paid version is for. By paying $1.90 a month, you get access to all chapters of every series the app has. Dragon Ball, Naruto, MHA, JoJo, One Piece, all of it for you to read. This is by far one of the best bang for your bucks deals you are gonna get. Now the Shonen Jump app comes with two caveats. One, the app enforces an arbitrary reading limit of 100 chapters per day, even to paying members. This is a dumb feature that has no business being in a paid service, and I hope they get rid of it soon. The second caveat is the bigger one, however. The Shonen Jump app is only available in these countries on screen. If you don't live in any of these, you can't use it. Technically. You see, the app is only region locked on the app stores of these countries, but it has no restrictions beyond that. So if you have an Android device, you can find the .apk file of the app online and simply install it without the app store, and it will work perfectly fine. You can even use the paid version. That's how I use it despite living in Switzerland, a non-canon country. But what if you don't have an Android device, or don't want to deal with shady APK files? Well, there is a global alternative, called Manga Plus. This app is also officially licensed and is available worldwide. It even features multiple languages besides English, including French, Spanish, and Portuguese. It, just like the Shonen Jump app, lets you read the first and newest 3 chapters of every series for free, so if you just want to stay up to date with your favorites, this is a very solid option. For any chapters besides the first and latest 3, those are also completely free to read, but only once. If you try to read the same chapter more than once, the app will instead redirect you to local websites selling the volume that chapter is in. You can distinguish whether or not a chapter is free forever or only once through these icons. Now, a quick word on reading manga illegally. I will neither link any illegal sites, nor will I judge you for finding them yourself. I don't know your life, your financial situation, or where you live, so I frankly have no business shaming you or judging you for how you choose to engage with this medium. I just want to say this. I believe that the options I have just illustrated are more than fair and reasonable ways to read manga legally, and I would implore you to at least try them out. They are available and well priced and absolutely worth a try, especially the Shonen Jump app. If $2 a month for the entirety of Weekly Shonen Jump is still not good enough of a deal for you, I kinda don't know what to tell you. Thus, I would hope you at least consider reading manga in this way that supports the creators, circulates money into the industry, and shows those in charge that there is ample interest in your region. If you, however, insist to read manga illegally for whatever reason, then I would at least recommend you to seek out official scans on whatever website you use. Fan scans are generally of very poor quality, and you deserve better. If I have to see another fucking My Hero panel that looks like this, well, it should look like this, I might lose my mind. I mean, look at this shit! The importance of first impressions in WSJ was highlighted on January 20th, 2020, with the release of Undead Unluck, an action shonen written and illustrated by Yoshifumi Tozuka. It follows the story of a young girl cursed to bestow terrible luck onto anyone who touches her. When she meets an undead maniac who wishes for his death, the two embark on a journey that takes them across the world and into the very depths of existence itself. When this series was announced, much of the marketing had a clear message, let's call it. All promo material focused on a deranged naked man grabbing a terrified young woman, the synopsis specified the relevance of skin contact, and yeah, you can tell where I'm going with this. Chapter 1 lived up to its own marketing, and most of it centered around Andy, the undead, trying to force himself on Fuko, the girl, to hopefully trigger a stroke of bad luck that'll finally kill him. This is the point where many, myself included, jumped ship, as this just seemed like yet another manga that reveled way too much in Japan's troubled relationship with sexual abuse. But then something weird happened. Undead Unluck just stopped being gross, fairly early on even. Instead, it started doing a thing we in the business call being really fucking good. Right now, in 2022, Undead Unluck might genuinely be one of the best series currently running in Weekly Shonen Jump. The series has left behind its icky starting chapters and become a fever dream of fantastic combat, incredible artwork, almost unmatched in the entire magazine, and even a genuinely engaging romance between these two main characters. How does that even happen? I don't know. Either way, I'm all in. The series is currently going through what seems to be its final arc, and it does not seem ready to slow down. With a confidence only rivaled by the likes of JoJo, devastatingly intense action, and some actually crazy twists, this story has begrudgingly made me its fan. If you were like me and bounced off the series early on, you might want to give it another try. The beginning chapters are rough, but if you can stick with it, it will absolutely be worth it. Or just wait for the anime by David Production, whom you may know as the studio behind JoJo and Fuego Force. What if Harry Potter was buff? That is a question that Mashle has been asking since its debut on January 27th, 2020, and the answer its author Hajime Komoto has so far come up with is lots of punches and lots of laughs. The core premise is very similar to Black Clover, world where everyone innately has magic, main character born without it. But instead of creating a typical shonen narrative out of it, Komoto decided to give his protagonist steroids and make him literally just punch magic away. Thus, Mashle is a comedic battle shonen that relies on outrageous characters and parodies while also being genuinely good at the battle shonen part. What's interesting for 2022 is what the series is currently like. In the afterword of Volume 7, Hajime Komoto had stated that the series was over halfway done, leading many to believe that the series was heading towards a conclusion as of this year. It seemed to mesh with the story's pace, as the main villain had made big moves right around this time, and the current arc at the time seemed pretty endgame. Well, in the afterword of Volume 10 in March of this year, Komoto just said he'd been lying and retracted his previous statement, saying that the story had still plenty of gas left. Okay, weird, but fine, I guess. And then, in Volume 11 in June, he circled back again and announced that actually, Mashle is in its final arc and the series is ending. All of this back and forth paints a picture of a somewhat indecisive planning process, one some believe was influenced by Shonen Jump headquarters, which is unsubstantiated as far as I can tell. Whatever the case may be, this final arc definitely feels like the result of a lot of confusion, as it goes from tight, high-octane storytelling to extremely dull wheel spinning. I guess we'll just have to see where it goes. Anime is also on the way too, by the way. I'm gonna be upfront, this is my least favorite manga in the magazine, and I don't want to hide that from you, full transparency. In publication since July 6, 2020, Me and Roboco by Shuhei Miyazaki centers around Roboco, a mechanical maid, and Bondo, weekly Shonen Jump mega fan, creating a gag manga that leans heavily into industry references and parodies. This is a series that has found surprising success, with great sales and even a short-form anime in the works. I cannot, however, personally recommend it. The humor almost entirely revolves around pointing at another series or facet of Shonen Jump and going, "Wow, can you believe we are referencing this?" Simply pointing out that other people's work exists isn't compelling comedy, in my opinion, and all it achieves is reminding you of all the better series you could be reading. It's especially apparent in its volume covers, which are just other manga series' volume covers, but with Roboco inserted into them. No joke, no creativity, no real punchline, just take someone else's work and your obnoxious mascot on top of it and ask people to laugh at it. It truly is the Family Guy of manga, except Family Guy is actually funny. High School Family by Ryo Nakama is the only series in Weekly Jump right now that I had not touched before starting work on this video. Despite it having been in the magazine since September 7th, 2020, I just never really interacted with it. Having read through it now though, I can say I didn't miss much. High School Family is about a young man who starts high school, only to realize in horror that his entire family has also enrolled into this exact school for increasingly ridiculous reasons. I would say more, but there really isn't much to say. This gag gets iterated on over and over again. Your parents are at school with you. The art is somewhat basic, with the dad having a very stylized face that can enhance the comedy sometimes. If this premise seems like fun to you, I guess I can recommend it, but personally, I didn't get much out of it. In the magazine since November 21st, 2020, Sakamoto Days by Yudo Suzuki is an action spy manga that tells the story of Sakamoto, the greatest hitman to ever live, who retired after settling down with his wife and family. Now the chubby owner of a convenience store, Sakamoto lives a peaceful life that is only occasionally interrupted by his murderous past and the shadowy world of assassins. Sakamoto Days has quickly become a heavy hitter of Shonen Jump, as it is a non-stop action spectacle with some of the best fight choreography and paneling I have ever seen in the magazine. Once things start moving, the energy this manga can imbue into still drawings is mesmerizing. This is helped by the distinctly urban setting of every fight, which sets it apart from the more barren landscapes many shonen fights tend to be in for the sake of simplicity. Add to this a JoJo-esque flair for bizarre and quirky characters, and Sakamoto Days quickly becomes one of the most enjoyable reads on a weekly basis. The plot itself is mostly there to facilitate cool characters fighting other cool characters, but that's really not a problem in this case, in my opinion. The characters are cool enough, and the plot is alright. Alright, time for another break. Let's talk about the Axeman! This isn't an official term, but rather a fan concept regarding manga cancellations. You see, not all series get the ending they want. Some series get axed, forced to end prematurely as their run in Jump is cancelled and their spot given to a new series. That's not really unusual. If you can't perform in the competitive market, you're gonna get yeeted. It is what it is, as much as we dislike it. However, with Weekly Shonen Jump, a sort of urban vibe has settled in. A general impression that Jump is a lot more aggressive and quick when it comes to cancelling series that aren't a hit. The magazine has even been accused of falling victim to the SpongeBob effect, wherein a publisher cancels every project that isn't immediately a hit upon first release. This is extremely hard to judge, however, since the magazine is extremely old and we are only generally talking about the last half decade or so. A while ago, this image was circulating around, a listing of how many series were axed every year from 2010 to 2020. This image suggested that the number of cancellations was almost stable within a range of about 7 to 10 series per year, with outliers that go as low as 5 and as high as 13. Now, if you know statistics, then you are probably screaming at the screen right now. This is pretty vague. The sample size of 10 years is fine, but could be bigger, and most of all, there is no data source given. In fact, the original post doesn't even exist anymore, only screenshots of it. Thus, verifying any of this and how it was used to arrive at these conclusions isn't possible, so unfortunately, this analysis of cancellations does not help us. So I just made my own. Let's first start by acknowledging that defining a series as cancelled is actually extremely difficult in the context of Weekly Shonen Jump. As far as the official marketing is concerned, no series ever gets cancelled, they simply conclude. The lingo of Shonen Jump announcements does not differentiate between a series organically ending and a series being forced to finish early. So in terms of official sources, we really have nothing. Before we can start counting cancellations, we need to come up with a working definition of what series to include and what criteria to consider. For this case, I decided to include every series that ran for less than 52 chapters. The reason for this specific number is that Weekly Shonen Jump releases 52 issues per year, and so 52 chapters would roughly indicate a run of about a year. Assuming that any series that ends before this was forced to do so is quite reductive, but it gives us something to work with. I will, however, exclude series where we know that they were intended to be short, such as things like Naruto's Extra Story or Jacko the Galactic Patrolman. This is, however, only a workaround. The only real way to determine accurately how many series were actually cancelled would be to read everything Jump has ever released and then judge whether or not the ending of each one seemed premature, which would be completely subjective and unscientific, not to mention the kind of monumental effort that would turn my brittle brain into dust. So for now, this imperfect approach will simply have to suffice. Now we need our sample size. I'm going to source the data from the easiest available place, Wikipedia's list of all titles to ever release in Weekly Shonen Jump, handily listed with start and end dates already. But how long of a time span should we look at? We could just do everything, but A, that would maybe actually kill me, and B, we would run into the issue of changing eras. The conventions of entertainment are in constant flux, and it's very possible that long-form manga were not nearly as common in the 1960s as they are now. Our 52-chapter definition only really works within a media ecosystem similar to the one we have now, so going too far into the past would supply us with useless and misrepresented data. So I think we just double the sample size of that Reddit image. Instead of 10 years, we do 20, which puts us within an era of media consumption that I understand, while still being a hefty enough chunk to be somewhat representative. Since 2022 isn't over yet, let's make our range end at 2021. So, we'll be looking at the years 2001 until 2021, counting every series that ended before reaching its 52nd chapter. A bit of editing magic and voila, we have our graph. Now, first impressions. 2 outlier years aside, the number of cancellations seems to stick to a somewhat consistent range across these 2 decades, generally hovering between 5 and 9, which is somewhat lower than what the Reddit image suggested. This is possibly a result of our criteria being more stringent than what this poster might have used. Now, the 2 outliers, 2015 and 2018, need a little bit of guesswork. Naruto, a heavy hitter for the magazine, ended in late 2014, so it is feasible that the massive gap in the book encouraged WSJ to rapidly inject new series into its publication in order to find the next big thing, which would have required a cancellation of any series that wasn't performing to make space for the newcomers. This could explain the increase in cancellations in 2015. As for 2018, we don't have a big name series ending to point towards, so we need to look somewhere else. In 2017, the leadership of Shonen Jump underwent a change, as Hiroyuki Nakano took over as editor-in-chief, the big boy position. While this wasn't a dramatic or unusual change for the company, it is feasible that with a new leader came a desire to clean house, so to speak. Additionally, 2018 was when the Shonen Jump app, as well as the global Manga Plus website, were launched, so maybe that led to a more pronounced curation of the magazine, as it would now be easily accessible to a much wider international audience. Both of these are complete shots in the dark, however. All the data is available in the description, so if you want to make your own interpretation, correct something that you think I may have made a mistake on, or even use it for further investigation on your own, go right ahead, it's right down there for you to use. But let's get back to the main question. Has Shonen Jump become more aggressive in cancelling series? Well, looking at these numbers, no, I don't think so. Outliers aside, there's been an increase in cancelled series since 2016, but even so, it's still in line with previous data. While there are clear peaks and valleys, this graph doesn't give us the means to definitively say that cancellations have become overall more frequent. For additional context, 2022 is nearing its end and we've only had 4 cancellations so far. So it doesn't look like this trend will continue either. But that's weird, right? For as long as I've been active online, there's been this idea that Shonen Jump has become more trigger happy with the axe, that any and every series is always under threat. Hell, anytime a new series is announced, people start betting if it'll survive past chapter 20. Did this sentiment just come out of thin air? I think the key word here is visibility. In 2018, Window West got an unprecedented level of accessibility to the weekly Shonen Jump magazine, not just in terms of the amount of stuff we had access to, but also the speed. With the dawn of global simulpub, we can now not only keep up with our favorite series, but with the entire magazine as a whole, actually observe its various happenings and comings and goings in real time. This was simply not possible in the past, as what series we had access to was heavily dictated by volume releases and isolated publishing deals. And so, series that didn't do well and ended up being cancelled were simply not really brought over here aside from fanscans, making us ignorant to both their existence and the premature end of said existence. But with these new apps and services, we now witness the entire Weekly Shonen Jump cycle as it unfolds, creating the impression of an increase of cancellations. So in short, cancellations seemingly didn't become more frequent. We simply gained more awareness of them and misattributed that to an increase that didn't exist. Could we have gathered that just intuitively without having to bother with the statistics bullshit? I mean, yeah, but then I wouldn't have gotten to show off my cool graph. 2021's first series in this video is The Elusive Samurai, which started publication on January 27th of that year. It is written and illustrated by Yusei Matsui, whom you may know from their previous series, Assassination Classroom. Elusive Samurai is however not a bizarrely heartwarming tale of students bonding with an alien, but instead a historical manga chronicling the events of the Kenmu Restoration, a period in Japanese history situated from 1333 to 1336. Specifically, it follows the exploits of real-life figure Hojo Tokiyuki, the heir to the Kamakura shogunate who has his birthright ripped away from him in a bloody uprising. The story thus follows the young lord's quest to free the land from a violent usurper and gather allies along the way. Now, the historical part of historical manga is both less and more literal than you may think. On one hand, the story plays fairly loosely with its real-life source material. Hojo Tokiyuki is turned into a small child with the elusive ability to be extremely good at dodging. His guardian Yorishige Suwa is a creepy angel being that tries way too hard to be as likable as Koro-sensei. And this guy has an anime waifu. As you can tell, it is overall a much more humorous and energetic retelling of this history. On the other hand, however, it is almost religiously dedicated to inundating the reader in dates, names of historical figures, and tangential anecdotes regarding to its history, to the point that even despite the humor, it can at times feel like an illustrated history lesson. Moreover, the series doesn't exactly find crazy new ways to communicate this information intuitively, so the manga will often resort to war diagrams and text floods. This is probably my biggest issue with The Elusive Samurai, personally. It is extremely dense of information that doesn't feel all that beneficial. Additionally, while there is lots of info here, the broader context of Japan's history is often glossed over and left opaque. This may be a consequence of the series being mainly targeted at its domestic Japanese audience, who would likely know how to fit the info they are getting into what they already learned in history class in public education. But to a Western reader such as myself, the manga creates a situation where I am drowned in copious amounts of hyper-specific historical information with no context as to how and why that information matters or fits in with any history I am actually familiar with. The result is a sort of confused apathy on my part whenever the series begins talking history, which unfortunately constitutes a fairly sizable chunk of it. That aside, however, Elusive Samurai is pretty fun. The jokes land surprisingly often, and while none of the main characters are all that memorable, there are plenty of extras and side characters that are just bizarre and interesting enough to make up for it. The actual plot is hit or miss, with it currently making me feel incredibly numb. Still, if you like fun and educational stories with a pinch of samurai, give The Elusive Samurai a shot. The author of Astra Lost in Space, Kento Shinohara, returned to Weekly Shonen Jump on February 8th, 2021 with Witch Watch, a magical slice-of-life series following the daily antics of Nico. Nico is a witch, and a particularly powerful one at that, which makes her a target for all sorts of nefarious elements. This will not work with her desire to live a normal high school life, and so she gradually assembles an entourage of magical bodyguards, including Moi, her ogre love interest, a Tengu, a vampire, and a MILF whose thighs are so huge that they are repeatedly described as an ocean-sized pillow of clouds. As far as premises go, Witch Watch is pretty fun, as it presents a character-driven comedy that occasionally dips into a cutesy romance plot. However, it has unfortunately fallen into a routine of just spinning its wheels, recycling the same 3 jokes over and over again with no clear direction forward. The actual plot of the series has at this point almost entirely vanished, as the series now focuses on episodic shenanigans that are never quite interesting enough in my opinion. Witch Watch has a sort of finite pool of subplots it nurtures, from which it draws seemingly at random whenever a new chapter needs to come out, and unfortunately, most of these subplots are just extremely unfunny, with some being just downright terrible. So yeah, unless you are really into slice of life, I would not recommend this one. Kojimura entered Weekly Shonen Jump on April 12, 2021 with the romantic sports series Blue Box. The story follows Taiki, a badminton player who falls in love with Shinatsu, a basketball prodigy, as they now must untangle their feelings while nurturing their athletic ambitions. When they are then forced to live together, well, spice ensues. Now, I called it a romantic sports series, but that wasn't quite right. Blue Box is more like a full-blown romance series that very occasionally pretends to be a sports series. The traditional matches and rivalries synonymous with sports shonen are almost completely absent, instead replaced with emotional introspection and cute comments of bonding and friendship. So if you see the cover of 2 characters in sportswear and are hoping for the next Haikyuu, then sorry, no, that's not what this is. If you are, however, open to a romance with light sports content, then Blue Box is excellent. It threads a delicate line between a tropey character comedy and a genuinely delicate love story that continuously reinvestigates the feelings it depicts. I am especially fond of how hard the series emphasizes the difference between projected emotion and real emotion. Is this what I truly feel, or is this what I have convinced myself I should feel? And are these feelings, real or imagined, fair towards the person they are directed at? Without spoiling anything, Blue Box is a series that is interested in exploring love and attraction not just in the mushy traditional way, but through a scope of responsibility, self-honesty, and prioritization. I can definitely recommend it. It has given me a lot of cool feelings. Musical manga are not exactly common in the Weekly Shonen Jump of the 2020s, and yet here we have just that. PPPPPP, or P6, by author Mapolo 3. In the magazine since September 17, 2021, P6 tells the story of Lucky Otogami, the youngest sibling of a 7-children family of musical geniuses. After his father divorces his mother and takes Lucky's 6 siblings with him, turning each of them into superstars, Lucky is left alone with his mom and her abusive relatives. When he now discovers that his mother only has a year left to live, Lucky decides to rise to the ranks of the musical world and join his siblings on the world stage, so that his mother can see them all perform together at least once before she passes. This setup is understandably very emotionally engaging, and if that is already all you need to hear, go for it. My personal experience with the manga was unfortunately nowhere near as emotional and great as this premise suggested. While the initial idea is very touching, music is inherently an ephemeral concept in manga, as the lack of sound in the medium creates a barrier between the subject matter and the reader. That is not to discredit musical manga as a whole, I'm just saying that I personally could not get over that barrier, as the frequent mentions of Lucky's talent and the genius of his siblings fell completely flat for me, as I had no way to understand or conceptualize the actual level of their performances. This isn't helped by the visual aspect either. The series has a very stylized look that does give it a unique edge, but unfortunately leads to a lot of visual clutter, especially when combined with the series' creative but often messy page layouts. Despite my issues with it though, P6 has amassed a very dedicated fanbase and performed very well in terms of sales, so this might just be a case of your mileage may vary. There are even fan-made recommendations of what classical music to listen to while reading each chapter. So if any of this sounds like an experience you'd like to have, go check it out. I guess I can recommend it even if it wasn't for me. On the complete opposite end of my spectrum of experiences lies Akane-Banashi, written by Yuki Suenaga and illustrated by Takamasa Moe. This coming-of-age story, launched on February 14th, 2022, focuses on Akane, the daughter of a famous rakugo performer. Rakugo is a traditional form of Japanese theater, where a single performer tells and acts out various stories. In Akane-Banashi, Akane's father is suddenly and seemingly without good reason banished from the art entirely and exiled from his rakugo dojo, forcing him to abandon his craft. Akane thus vows to rise to the ranks of the rakugo world to eventually face the master that exiled her father, in order to learn why it happened. Let me be clear about this manga's quality. It made me, someone who had never even heard about it before, give a shit about rakugo. Akane-Banashi is by far one of the best newcomers of the magazine in ages, in my opinion. Its character-driven shonen narrative effortlessly blends comedy and drama into a really satisfying package. The series manages to teach the reader about rakugo continuously, and it never fails to understandably explain how and why a particular performance works or doesn't work. Much time is dedicated to exploring the theater styles of the various rakugo performers the story introduces, and it's all done in a very digestible and very fun way, which is in contrast to some of the other series we've talked about. But what really strikes me about Akane-Banashi is the extreme restraint it shows with its characters. Shonen, as a children and teen-directed medium, can often simplify and exaggerate human characteristics in order to communicate its story. There is nothing wrong with that, but it does mean that many shonen characters can act in extremely binary and intense ways. Antagonists and obstacles are often unreasonably evil, for example. Not so in Akane-Banashi. Here, all characters, no matter if they are in opposition or in favor of our main heroine, have a consistent internal logic based not on their plot role, but on concerns and priorities that feel correct for the kind of character that they are. In many other adolescent stories, for example, the school teacher that tries to stop the young main character from pursuing their art would be a raging Puritan, a steaming old head opposed to the arts on principle. But in Akane-Banashi, that teacher is simply and realistically concerned about that career path's viability, imploring Akane to consider it thoroughly. Despite being an antagonistic role, she is a fully fledged, believable person, something I really appreciate. Yeah, as you can guess, full recommendations on Akane-Banashi. I cannot gush enough about it. It is fantastic. Okay, let's take one last break before we discuss the final few series. While we do so, let's ask a question. Do you want to publish a Shonen Jump manga? Maybe you have a story idea stuck in your head. Maybe you want to show off your art. Maybe you already have a niche but successful series published on Webtoons or a similar service, yet yearn for a step closer towards the series that inspired you. Well, your time may have come with Manga Plus Creators. I just realized how much that sounded like a sales pitch, so just so we're clear, this is not a sponsored segment. This is just a cool thing I want more people to know about, so yeah, hashtag not sponsored. Manga Plus Creators is a web service created by Medibang in partnership with Shueisha themselves. It is a global manga and comic submission website that functionally works basically exactly like Webtoons. You upload your manga and people can read it all for free. But there is one key difference. Every month, all series submitted to Manga Plus Creators are ranked by metrics such as views, likes, and read-throughs, and the top 5 are sent to Shueisha and Shonen Jump's head editorial staff. The staff will then review those top 5 and give out awards that can range from 1 million Japanese yen to a publication contract with Shonen Jump Plus, the online magazine that is currently publishing Chainsaw Man, and Manga Plus, the app we discussed earlier. This is an unprecedented opportunity for us in the West, and one I really hope some of you consider. I surely don't have to convince you that being published in the same breath as Chainsaw Man or One Piece is not just good for your career, but also just cool as fuck. Now, I do have to mention that since the service is extremely new, we don't have many monthly awards yet given, so if you prefer waiting to see how successful this service and the series it nurtures can actually be, that is a very fair concern to have. As for anyone who might be interested, I'm sure you have some basic questions, which I'll go over real quick using the website's FAQ, hopefully alleviating some worries you may have. Can I upload my series even if I already published it on Webtoons, DeviantArt, etc.? Yes, that is completely fine as far as Manga Plus creators is concerned. Note that any other website your work may be on, like Webtoons, may have their own rules about this, however, so do inform yourself on that beforehand. Also important to note is that according to their FAQ, it is allowed to upload your manga even if you've already published it professionally, as long as no copyright is violated. In this case, however, your manga may be excluded from the monthly awards. What language can my manga be in? Manga Plus creators accept submissions in English and Spanish and is globally available. Do note that English and Spanish series are ranked and awarded separately. What kind of manga is allowed? In terms of quality and polish, anything goes. As long as the art and text are intelligible, you are good to go on that front. As for content, this service is subject to submission guidelines. Most of these are pretty basic stuff. No hate speech, no encouraging of illegal activities, no literal posting of the recipe for meth. You have to be kind of careful with violence and sexual content though. Manga Creators Plus will only accept works with the suitable for all ages rating. This, however, doesn't seem to be very strict, as the monthly winner for September, Gender X Border, has loads of partial nudity and ecchi content. So it's not really a ban on mature content, just a barrier that will force you to find workarounds and metaphors to tell the story you want to tell. Is this a little hypocritical from a magazine that happily publishes this? Probably, but it is what it is. Limitation breeds creativity, and I cannot wait to see what you come up with. I hope this cleared up some immediate questions. I have linked the service in the description, so check out their FAQ yourself for more info. And while you're there, my little sister has actually submitted her work to the service as well, so if you feel like it, check out Mirror War on Manga Plus Creators, link in the description. It's a fun read. Again, not sponsored, she is just, literally my sister. Released on June 6, 2022, Aliens Area is an urban sci-fi action series written and illustrated by Fusai Naba. After losing his parents at a young age, main character Tatsumi works hard to support his younger siblings. When he discovers that he was mysteriously implanted with super-powered alien bioweaponry, he is taken in by a government bureau that deals with aliens and their affairs, entering a world of unknowns. Aliens Area draws inspiration from both alien battle manga such as Parasite and Western depictions of alien-human relations, especially Men in Black. In fact, it would not be entirely wrong to call this just a Men in Black manga. The story fluctuates between high-energy shonen fights and urban alien mischief, with a particular focus on the bureaucracy of having to coax aliens into peacefully coexisting with humans. While it's an interesting premise that sometimes lives up to its own potential, the manga is bogged down with a lot of fairly uninteresting exposition and scenes that really feel like filler. The art style doesn't help either. While it tries to evoke a sketchy aesthetic similar to Jujutsu Kaisen and Chainsaw Man, it unfortunately just looks unfinished often and unappealing, with some really trippy art mistakes that just pull you right out of the experience. Only recommended if you really love Men in Black, I guess. The most successful newcomer to WSJ this year is Ruri Dragon by Masaoki Shindo. Ever since its debut on June 13th, 2022, this cute story about a young girl discovering that she's half dragon has received general positive reception as well as great financial success. Its first volume has already started selling out in various outlets. It's no wonder. It's a light but overall very competent slice of life that very much falls into the cute girls doing cute stuff category of manga, amplified by the fantastical twist of a dragon girl slowly discovering her various abilities and superpowers. Which is why this next paragraph is so painful to say. Ruri Dragon is currently on an indefinite hiatus, having only released 6 chapters so far. This hiatus was brought about by the author's poor health, and has so far no end in sight. It is, as you can tell, a pretty upsetting situation. A young author who previously gained fame through the incredibly well-received one-shot Count Over finally gets to be fully serialized in Weekly Shonen Jump, only for his health to immediately deteriorate and force him into an indefinite hiatus. The silver lining here, if you really want to see one, is that such an agreement was even possible with such a new author. Shindo was not forced to simply abandon his new series, but could instead have his situation accommodated within the magazine. That is, I guess, kind of a good sign. The first released volume is listed as a Jump Plus volume, so Ruri Dragon may actually be getting transferred to the web-based magazine to profit from its much less stringent release schedule. I hope he recovers soon. It's a real shame seeing something like this happen. One of the 2 newest series in Jump is Tokyo Demon Bride Story by Tadaichi Nakama. Freshly entering the magazine on September 4th, 2022, this story centers around a young boy and girl who promise to marry each other when they're grown. Years later, they have lost contact, and the boy has now grown into a young man. When the girl returns into his life as an Oni, a Japanese demon, he is introduced to a cavalcade of magical beings and their weird and wacky world. I don't enjoy calling any series generic, but I am struggling to find another term for this series. There is very little fresh content here, as Tokyo Demon Bride Story pulls story elements and premises from all over Shonen's recent history, while not really coalescing into anything I personally find entertaining. It has fights, some ecchi stuff, a few waifus for good measure, and a snarky main character that actually totally cares. But none of it is so far a highlight in my eyes. Then again, keep in mind that I'm talking about a 5-chapter series here. Nonetheless, the very first impression is not particularly convincing. Also, the art is mostly good except when it isn't. There seem to be a few perspective oddities here and there, especially with the main character's face. No clue what that's about, but I really hope the author gets a grip on that as soon as possible. The actual newest series in Jump, as well as our final topic today, is Ginka Glüna, penned by Shinbei Watanabe and in publication since September 11th, 2022. In a world of magic and dragons, a young hermit girl befriends a talking snowman and convinces it to teach her magic. In return, she vows to find the snowman's original body to restore him to his former, non-snow glory. As far as premises go, Ginka Glüna has a lot going for it. Its world is magical and fun, and the series makes it a point to highlight its bizarre and interesting aspects and creatures almost immediately. Additionally, magic as a world-building tool as opposed to a pure power system is a very cool concept that Weekly Shonen Jump has seen a few times but rarely allowed to succeed. So this series may finally be the magical adventure romp some, myself included, are craving. Unfortunately, some issues have already manifested themselves in the 4 chapters the series currently has. Namely, Ginka Glüna has a really nasty tendency to skip over some of its most interesting concepts. That magical training that Glüna would undergo to be able to explore the world, all of that is skipped over in a single page turn, leaving the actual nature and extent of her magic, the main draw of this series, entirely unseen. Something like this has already happened on 3 separate occasions this early on in the series, and personally it really does bug me. Either way, this might be a series worth keeping an eye on, as its adventure type is very reminiscent of early One Piece. Phew! We did it! Following Weekly Shonen Jump is a lot of fun. It can often get reduced to just the One Piece magazine. But as I hope you've seen today, it is the seedbed for many varied and cool creative works. While every year we'll have the My Heroes and the Jujutsus, it is always worth looking into the magazine beyond the big boys, especially now with the unprecedented level of accessibility we finally have to it and its weekly happenings. I also hope this video gave you a general impression of what you can find in Weekly Shonen Jump right now in 2022. Maybe you have even found the next manga to put on your endless reading soon list. Remember, volume 1 of each manga that we discussed is available in the description, so go check it out if you're interested. But either way, thank you all for watching, and happy reading. I'll see you next time. My voice is fucking gone. Jesus Christ, why did I want to be on camera? Fuck. A very special thank you to all of our patrons, and of course including Harthire, Fictionape, Cini, Pidefuego, Courage, Eric Nelson, Ethan Miller, Iron Camel, Jameson Tate, Ludenther, Oakwood Tree, Paracha, Peros Coco, Project Iceman, Wisdom Minari, Makoto 2, Mr. Pyramid, Mr. Meander, and Geo. Thank you all so much for your continued support, and remember, if you want to become a patron, you do get access to every video a little bit earlier. We're talking usually 1 or 2 days. I don't want to withhold content for too long, but I also want to give you something special to look forward to. Either way, wow, my voice is gone. I'll see you around. Bye!